Hi, Math 3 students. Today we are going to review factoring trinomials, okay? So there's two different ways you have to factor trinomials. We have the easy kind of factoring when our a value is 1, and then we have the more challenging kind of factoring. Some of you guys learned guess and check, and some of you guys learned AC. In this video, I am going to teach you using AC method. However, if you feel comfortable with guess and check, you are more than welcome to use that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started here. So when do we know we can use trinomial factoring? That's going to be when we have three terms, okay? Now, the easy trinomial factoring we can do when our a value, which is this first coefficient here, is 1. So if there's no number attached to the x squared, that means that our a value is going to be 1. Now, just like any kind of factoring, the first thing we always look for is a GCF, okay? In this case, we don't have a GCF, so we're going to go ahead and use our trinomial factoring. So for the easy kind, we have to ask ourselves, what two numbers multiply to this guy and add to this guy? So I know that to get an x squared, I'm going to need an x and an x here, okay? And now I need to figure out what my multiples of 12 are. Now, you might know the answer just from looking at it, and that's great. If you don't know it, though, you can just list out the factors. So we'd have like 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Okay? Now, I know I want to multiply to a positive and add to a positive, so that tells me that both my numbers are going to be positive. And I just got to figure out which pairing is going to add to 7, and that's going to be these two here. So I just do plus 3 and plus 4. And that would be my answer there. All right, so another trinomial here, we look for a GCF. There is no GCF, so we go ahead and we can do easy trinomial factoring because there's no a value other than 1, so we just need to find the two numbers that are going to multiply to -6 and add to this number in the middle. Now, even though there's no number in the middle, we go with the coefficient on this middle term, and that coefficient's a -1 here, okay? So let's go ahead and list out the factors of 6. Okay, 6, we've got 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. Now, to figure out the signs, we want to multiply to a -6. If we want to multiply to a negative number, we know we're going to have one positive, one negative, okay? Then, if we want to add to a negative, okay, we have to figure out which one has to be negative. Well, if we want to add to a negative, we want our bigger number to be negative. All right, so those are going to be our pairings, and we can look, okay, which pairing adds to -1? It's going to be these guys. So we put our x and our x, and then we're going to have a +2 and a -3. All right, if we take a look here, we don't got a GCF, so we can go ahead and try easy trinomial factoring because we don't have any, we don't have an a value greater than 1. An a value greater than 1. All right, so we just need to find the two numbers that multiply to this guy and add to this guy. So we want to multiply to 24. That's going to give us 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. We want to multiply to a positive and add to a negative. So in order to multiply to a positive, we either need two positives or two negatives. Well, if we're trying to add to a negative, they're both going to have to be negative. All right, so our pairing that's going to work here is going to be -4 and -6. So we set up our binomials here. We've got a -4 and a -6. All right, go ahead and see if you can do this one here. So we have to go ahead and figure out what two numbers multiply to this guy and add to this guy. So the two numbers that should have worked for you here are x + 9 and x - 7. Now, the order doesn't matter. You could put like x - 7 first if you want. Those are both acceptable answers. All right. Next one here. So, I'll go ahead and do this one. We have to find the two numbers that multiply to this guy and add to this guy. So if we want to multiply to 3, there's not a lot of ways to get 3, right? We've got 1 and 3. That's it. If we want to multiply to a +3, we either need two positives or two negatives. Well, we're adding to a negative, so we're going to need a negative and a negative. We got x - 1, x - 3. All right. Go ahead and see if you can give this guy a shot here. So we want to go ahead and figure out what two numbers multiply to -5 and add to -4. All right, so that is going to be a +5 and a -1. No, it's not. It's going to be a -5 and a +1. The answer I had before, let's talk about why it was bad. If I had this, I would be adding to a +4, and I want to add to a -4. So I got to make sure that my negative number is bigger. All right, so for this one, oops, I was erasing. We got to find the two numbers that multiply to -42 and add to -1. So that is going to go ahead and be a -7 and a +6. And then this last one here, we want to multiply to a -48 and add to 8. All right, so if we want to multiply to a negative, we know we're going to need one negative, one positive. Now, this one may not be as obvious from looking at it, so you could, of course, list out your factors. Here's the deal. You don't have to list out the factors every time, okay? So if you can do it quickly without listing them out, like, here I was just able to look at it and know, that's totally fine. But if you need to list the factors out, go for it. If you're stuck, list the factors out. So let's say we're trying to list out the factors for 48. We would get 1 in 48, 2 in 24, 3, I think 3 works. I don't know if that's 16. 48 divided by 3. I'm having a brain fart. 16, okay. And then 4 and 12. 5's not going to work. 6 does work, right? If you do 48 divided by 6, you get 8. And then 7 doesn't work. And we want to multiply to a -48, which means we're going to need one negative number. And if we want to add to a positive, that means that our bigger number needs to be positive, our smaller number needs to be negative. So the pairing here that's going to work is these two guys. We get x -4 and x plus 12. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and factor with an a value greater than 1. Now, these guys are a lot trickier, but you can totally handle it, okay? And like I said, I am teaching you using AC method. So for AC method, what you got to do is first you look for a GCF. Again, no matter what you're doing, if you're factoring, you look for a GCF first. In this case, we don't have one. So we're going to go ahead and do AC factoring. So what that means is we're going to take our first and our last, which is like where AC comes from, is quadratics. When they're in standard form, we write them like this, like ax squared plus bx plus c. We're doing a times c. Okay, so that's where AC method comes from. So a times c gives me 6. So what I need to do is I need to find the two numbers that multiply to 6 and add to -5. So the two numbers that are going to work here, well, I guess here, I'll list them all out. We know we have 1 and 6 to give us a 6, and 2 and 3 to give us a 6. We want to add to we want to multiply to a positive, add to a negative, which means both of my numbers are going to be negative. So in this case, I'm going to use -2 and -3. So what we're going to do now is rewrite the -5 using my two magic numbers, okay? So we write the rest of the quadratic the same, but the -5 needs to be rewritten, or I should say -5x needs to be rewritten using -2 and -3. So we've got 2x squared, and instead of -5x, I'm going to do -2x minus 3x, and then I got to add my 3 on the end here, okay? Now, one important thing to point out is the order of these two numbers doesn't matter in the middle. You will end up with the same final answer if you do everything correct, okay? So just keep that in mind. All right, so here I look at my first two guys, and what we have to do is find the greatest common factor between these two up in front. So essentially what you're doing now is the factoring by grouping, which you guys have already learned. So we go ahead, we look at the first two. I can take a 2x out, which is going to give me an x minus 1. And then I look at my second grouping. And if you recall, when this first term is negative, we want to pull a negative out. And we can also pull 3 out, which is going to give me x minus 1. So then to write our final answer, we're going to take the 2 guys that we pulled out, so 2x minus 3. We're going to write him once. And then this repeated guy, we only write once. All right, let's try another one. So, of course, you go ahead and you try and find a greatest common factor. I've got 3, 22, and 24. 3 and 24 have a GCF of 3, but 3 doesn't work for 22. So there is no GCF here. So I'm going to go ahead and use my AC factoring because I have an A value that is bigger than 1. So I go ahead and I multiply. I'm going to do 3 times 24. And I get 72. So I need to find the 2 numbers that multiply to 72 and add to 22. All right. So that's going to give me 1 and 72, 2 and 36, 3 and, let's see, it's been a long day. I'm struggling with my multiplication. 24. 4 should work as well. 72 divided by 4, we get 18. 5 doesn't work. 6 does work, right? 72 divided by 6 gives me 12. All right. 7 doesn't work. 8 does work. If I do 72 divided by 8, I can do 8 and 9. You know you're done listing out the factors once you start repeating. So like if I continue down with my list, I would try 9, which means I'm starting to like work my way back up. So that means we got all of our factors there. And if you want to multiply to a positive and add to a positive, they're both going to be positive. And we just got to figure out what pairing adds to 22. So in this case, that's going to be my 4 and my 18. So I go ahead. I have to rewrite my middle term using my 2 numbers that I just found. Everything else stays the same, so I'm going to do 3x squared plus 4x plus 18x plus 24. Oops, I wanted to do that in red. So now we can go ahead and do our factoring by grouping. So we've got this here. We can take an x out. We get 3x plus 4. And then here, my GCF, let's see, 18 and 24 is going to be 6. So I get 3x and 4. So, whoops, 3x plus 4. All right, so then I go ahead, I can use these guys, make a binomial, and multiply that by 3x plus 4. All right, let's try another one. So, of course, I look for a GCF. I do not have a GCF here, so I'm just going to go straight to my AC factoring. So 14 times 6 is going to give me 84. Oh, actually, we need negative 84, right? Because it's 6 and negative 14. So let's go ahead and list out all of our factors of 84. We'd have 1 and 84, 2 and 42. I think 3 is going to work here. Let's see, 84 divided by 3, that's going to be 28. 84 and 4 should also work, I believe, which is going to give me 21. 84 and 5 won't work. 84 and 6. Oops. Gives me 14, so 6 times 14. 84 and 7 I don't think will work. Oh, it does. Oh, wow, I should have known that one. That's embarrassing. 7 times 12. And then 84 and 8 does not work. It gives me a decimal. 84 and 9 does not work. 84 and 10 is not going to work. 84 and 11 isn't going to work. And then I get to 84 and 12, which means I'm repeating, so I'm done listing out factors. So that's a lot. Now, if we are trying to multiply to a negative and add to a negative. So if we're multiplying to a negative, we know we need one negative number. And if we're adding to a negative, my bigger number needs to be negative. So I'm going to go ahead and make all of these guys negative. So now we got to go ahead and figure out what pairing is going to add to a negative 17. So if we look at these numbers here, my 4 and negative 21 are going to work. So I go ahead, I have to rewrite my middle number using my 2 magic numbers here. So I've got my 6x squared, And then instead of 17x, I'm going to put plus 4x minus 14x minus 14. And then I just got to do my factoring by grouping. Here, I can take a 2x out, and I get 3x plus 2. I wonder if you guys realized I made a mistake. Where did oh, I just like randomly pulled the negative 14 instead of the 21. And actually, I guess it's kind of important for me to show you like how I know I made a mistake. Because when I went to go factor this guy here, the GCF would be minus 14, right? And I'd be left with like x plus 1. These guys don't match. So, sorry. We need to go ahead. If you don't have an eraser, it's no big deal. Just like right below it, rewrite it and change the negative 14 to a negative 21. If you do have an eraser, erase all of this. I'm such a silly goose. All right. So this should be a minus 21x. There we go. So now let's try this again. I got my GCF of 2x. I get 3x plus 2. And then in my second grouping here, my GCF is going to be a negative 7. It's negative because this first guy's negative, and 21 and 14, I get 7. I divide everything by negative 7, which is going to give me an 3x plus 2. So now I got the same binomials there, so that means I did it right. So I get 2x minus 7 and 3x plus 2.